We saw another almost 800,000 initial jobless claims. That's not very exciting for the month of December, is it?
No, it isn't. In fact, we're looking for, sort of a flat to down number. Even up to 100,000 is not significantly different from zero at this stage of the game. And I think that's very important when you're still 10 million in the hole. And looking at the unemployment claims that we got today, actually the not seasonally adjusted numbers were up quite significantly. And we also know that the special pandemic applications fell precipitously. And part of that was because we had the timing of when the president actually signed the bill into law on the most recent aid bill allowed some of those things to lapse and lose a week. The Labor Department decided to restore it. So all that confusion likely pushed more of those claims into early January than we actually saw in the month for the week ending January 2nd. So I think that's important. And if you look at the weeks on jobless claims between mid-November and mid-December, they're actually up quite a bit. So I think we're going into the hardest mile of the marathon that has become the coronavirus marathon.
And we are reminded by both health officials and also by the data themselves, Diane, that this is going to be a tough period. COVID is getting worse, not better, in the next couple of weeks, almost certainly. In terms of the economic damage, does stimulus come in time to head that off? And it may do so at an individual level, but at what point do you begin to worry about these layoffs that then become a little bit more structural, a little harder to bounce back from?
I'm already worried about that, given the high percent. We'll see that tomorrow as well. But already in November, 36% of just the people we count as unemployed, not the 4.1 million that have left the labor force entirely since February. Just that ones that we count as long-term unemployed are more than 6 months. 6 months is that tipping point where you tend to see mental and physical health deteriorate, along with family structure and the well-being of children. So clearly we're getting into a period in time where the scarring related to the crisis is already beginning to take effect. And even as we get into herd immunity, it's still a long road between here and there, given the slow pace of vaccinations and the mutation of the virus to be much more contagious and potentially, hopefully this is wrong, but potentially hurtful to children, much harder on children as well. And the UK data coming out is showing that children are bigger carriers and being hospitalized. That makes it harder to reopen schools and all the things that the new administration would like to do with additional stimulus. I think we're going to need additional aid and stimulus on the other side of this to deal with some of those wounds.
And we are getting confirmation now that President-elect Biden will tap Boston Mayor Marty Walsh for Secretary of Labor. Marty Walsh, who of course was Boston Building Trades head, the union that represented all the Boston building workers, and also had more background in union work before he became Boston mayor. One of the reasons he was elected Boston mayor. Diane, I do want to talk to you, though, about the potential commerce pick. Wilbur Ross obviously became a household name, maybe one of the few commerce secretaries in history to become a household name thanks to the trade wars and, the tariffs and that whole conversation that really dominated before this last period. If Gina Raimondo, the Rhode Island governor, is elected, and she is said now to be President-elect Biden's pick for commerce secretary, what does she represent in terms of a trade outlook?
Well, I think you're going to see just a continuation from what Biden has already talked about on the campaign trail, and that is more multilateralism rather than the bilateralism we've seen. This is important both for trade in terms of pressuring China and how we deal with China, getting our allies to work with us. The TPP was one way to do that, poorly sold by the Obama administration in terms of isolating China with the world on the other side of China, trying to get China to behave in a better way on trade. And I think that's what you'll see more out of this administration. I also think you're going to see she also worked very hard to get, some interesting issues done on pensions for Rhode Island, which is going to be very important going forward and represents an important bridge to the business community. So it's a little more moderate, offsetting the union side of it with the Labor Department. And that's what you're seeing is sort of a broad spectrum of people coming into the Biden administration. And I think that's really important. But she brings to the table sort of this ability. She's she's got to navigate working with business, dealing with regulatory issues, with Commerce Department, dealing with technology issues as well. And that's going to be really important. So I think the Biden administration on the trade issue, too, to emphasize this, our allies are really important on a multilateral trade basis to also deal with the threat that Iran currently poses. The Biden administration is going to be dealing with that. So this idea of multilateralism and restoring frayed relationships with our allies is going to be a key backbone to our foreign policy as well as trade policy.
And yeah, some of your allies like Canada will be watching that very closely indeed. In terms of what you've heard so far of the overall makeup of cabinet, and Raimondo may be a good example of this, are you seeing people who will be good bipartisan choices? In other words, people that will be satisfactory to the other side of the aisle as well and allow for a little less friction?
I think, yeah, you know, what's interesting about the choices is rather than being a choice of the Obama administration, which many people have sort of lumped them into as an extension of, and I actually think that's wrong, because there was sort of the team of rivals that the Obama administration had sought to get, and there was a lot of tension there, and these are more a team of collaborators, and I think that's very important. They're also a very diverse group, and so they're a team of collaborators that bring diversity to the equation in a different way, and I think that's going to be something certainly on the economic side that is welcome news. They also have a focus on climate change. So bringing more cohesiveness and in their messaging, I think, is going to be very important. And looking for ways to reach across the aisle. There are Republicans that support efforts on climate change as well. And in this world that we're in, where we need to heal from what has just happened and show that our institutions of democracy still work, I think there is that sort of opportunity that Greg Valliere, who you had on earlier, had sort of hinted at, that you could have some more bipartisan effort, at least initially. I don't have any sort of delusions that we're going to mend or heal the divisions that divide us so deeply in this country anytime soon. But there is actually some chance with this sort of transitional period to get a little bit more done. The key is, it's not going to be a lot done, which will frustrate some people out there. A lot of people, I think, it will frustrate, but some movement forward on issues like climate change and the diversity issues are going to be very important. Infrastructure, as you mentioned earlier, also very important.